Welcome to Lead Different.
What is the greatest obstacle to effective leadership? You might be surprised to learn it's not a lack of resources or strategy. It's a lack of self-knowledge. Welcome back to the Lead Different podcast. Today I'm joined by Kyle Neilson, a structured coach who brings incredible clarity and simplicity to the complex world of team leadership. Kyle has a fascinating background, moving from deep theology studies to helping organizations find their advantage. While I like to throw things in the air and challenge the status quo, Kyle is the expert at bringing a clear plan of action to the table. In this conversation, we dive into the power of Patrick Lencioni's working genius model and why understanding your own non-giftings is just as important as knowing your strengths. Kyle shares his personal journey of hitting professional bumps and how a single book changed the trajectory of his career and his coaching. This episode is a must-watch for any leader who wants to stop spinning their wheels and start leading with true clarity. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned as we learn to lead different with Kyle Neilson.
Why not leadership? Why not lead different?
Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Welcome to the show, Kyle Neilson. It is so good to have you on the Lead Different podcast. We had the opportunity to meet through a networking opportunity through Cent Ventures, and I've had a few conversations with you. And to those of you listening, I got to tell you, Kyle Neilson's a really smart guy. He is doing some great things in terms of helping leaders lead teams better. And you would think, Dan, that's what you do. Why are you having your competitor on? Well, let me tell you something. Two things. I believe in abundance. I think there's plenty of people out there that need help, that need our help. They need the help that Kyle provides. And we do what we do so differently. Kyle is a very structured coach. He brings clarity. He brings great problem-solving ability, and he brings simplicity to the work that he does. And if you work with me, you know that none of those elements are present in anything that I do. What I do is I care a lot about people. That's my number one driver, contributing. And so, that's the number one thing that I want to do. But I challenge the status quo and break things. I like to come in. I'm the kind of guy that comes into your organization and says, let's throw it in the air and see what happens. And that's not what Kyle's going to do. He's going to bring in a clear plan of action. He's going to bring simplicity, and he's going to make sense of things. But welcome to the show, Kyle. Glad to see you this morning.
Thank you, Dan. Great to be here. And I look forward to having you break things in my life, maybe in this conversation.
You know, that is so fun to do, but not everybody's comfortable with it. And that's one of the things that I talk about all the time. Whenever I'm meeting a client for the first time, I kind of lead with that YOS that you and I were talking about in the pre-show, Kyle. I say, look, I'm here to contribute. I'm here to help you. I'm going to do everything I can to help you get better. That's my number one driver. My second driver, though, is one you have to watch out for, is I like to challenge the status quo, do things different, do things out of the box. And so if being uncomfortable makes you uncomfortable, this might not be a fit. But if you're looking for creative and out of the box, we're going to get along great. And then my what is make sense. So you and I share make sense. I like to solve problems. At the end of the day, I'm going to throw everything up in the air and it's going to look weird, but I'll help you make sense of it and then implement it so that you can move forward faster. So it's just a great way for us to communicate who we are. You're a big fan of Patrick Lencioni's 5 Working Genius. And as I was reading your bio and learning more about you, you're also had an experience with his book, The Advantage. And when I look at that book, it really fits how you work, Kyle. So I know there's a story behind the book. Tell me a little bit about The Advantage and how it impacted you.
Sure. I was in the first 10 years of my career, which after doing theology studies in graduate school at Steubenville, I worked in diocesan and parish ministry and thought that I would do that for all of my career. Just kind of made sense of of where the Lord had taken me and what I was doing and what I thought I was gifted at. And for 7 years, I was just plugging away at help parishes with evangelization, and we did some men's ministry stuff, some small group formation. For a few years, I supported parishes in their RCIA enterprise, and it was great. And I think at year 7, or no, maybe it was year 8 or 9, actually, into that part of my professional life, which was going generally quite well, I hit some bumps. I got promoted and was in a position for which I didn't really have probably a ton of experience. It was a new blank slate role in a new-ish office at the diocese. And I realize now that part of why it was a bit bumpy for me was I am not naturally a very inventive person. Per the working genius model, for those who know it, the genius and the function within work of invention is creating new ideas and solutions out of nothing. And I don't do well at that. I don't enjoy it. I get kind of overwhelmed. I spin my wheels if you just put me with a kind of a blank whiteboard and ask me to come up with things, either myself or even in discussion with someone else. I'll generally be a follower in that spot. Excuse me. In my office, in that role, in that office at the time, it was expected, it was expected that I would create new things because it was a new office, as I said. And it just didn't go well. Now, I didn't know about this area of non-gifting, if you will, in not being an inventor at the time. So I had a lack of kind of self-knowledge. And as we know, self-knowledge is so critical. There's the famous quote that was taught to me, but I think it might be St. Gregory the Great, which is the greatest obstacle to ministry. And you could swap out ministry and swap in just good, effective work. I think the greatest obstacle to good work / ministry is a lack of self-knowledge, which is kind of surprised me when I first read that, because you might think from this luminary in the church who's a great saint that he would say something more spiritual, right? Like the greatest obstacle to ministry or great work is a lack of what? Virtue or faith or self-control or wisdom. But he said self-knowledge. And so coming around to your question, I realized I wasn't in a role. I didn't know myself, and I didn't know what to do with some of these areas of strengths and weakness, just from a lack of experience and wisdom and self-knowledge. And so it led me into a dark period. I think that plus spiritual warfare, plus just being an imperfect human being, led me into some depressive periods, which was not fun at all, kind of in and out for a few years. And fast forward, I had met a colleague through the catechetical world, which was my professional world and how I was educated, or in what I was educated, who is a friend of Patrick Lencioni. His name's Keith Borcher. He's a wonderful man. And we did some catechetical consultation work at the Augustine Institute, I was part of something that he was organizing there, and we got to know each other, connected, and then I found out he had started this consulting group called Evangelium Consulting Group that was based on the models and the methods of Patrick Lencioni. And Keith had worked with Patrick and shadowed him and worked on some Catholic projects, and then with Pat's encouragement and blessing, started this consulting group to serve Catholic groups with it. In the process of those discussions, I read The Advantage. And I read it at the time when I was working at the diocese and was in some struggles, as I said. And it blew me away, because I also realized, in addition to the personal stuff I described about me, the organizational stuff, and that, per your notes, when things aren't clear in some kind of way, people generally don't thrive. And I realized, there's some areas of clarity that I didn't know I didn't have and didn't know I needed, but are part of why I'm probably struggling. For example, not having a clear game plan for your office or clear measurable goals. I had some, for sure. It wasn't like it wasn't nothing, but there was probably just more that I hadn't known I could need. And also, I really thrive with being held accountable. And accountability, of course, depends on expectations, which ideally need to be measurable. And I had some of that, and I had fantastic people around me, good bosses and advisors. So I'm not criticizing any person, but maybe it's just a me thing. There was some clarity I didn't have. And in that absence, enter the devil, who suggests a narrative about me that played on my stresses and insecurities and wounds and what have you. And I began to think that I was kind of a lousy guy. And that took me out. So the advantage shed light on this and was profound. So fast forward, I jumped in with my 2 feet to get involved with Keith in this consulting work, because I thought, wow, if I can learn how to, just for my own good and my work, but also help others discover these principles and methods and practices of clarity and better teamwork and better meetings, knowing how it could have helped me, I was very excited for the opportunity. So I did, and began consulting to parishes, and within my job, actually, at the diocese, with my bishop's permission, not as a business. And it was profound. It was profound because now I was helping people with my gifts of loving to help get to clarity, helping them discover more clarity and apply it in practical ways. And I think on a philosophical level, the intellect, right? It exists to know the truth. That's why God created it. We're rational creatures, and we desire to know, whether natural or supernatural, ideally both forms of knowledge and truth and wisdom. And to play a part in that in the natural operational level within mission-driven organizations, in particular the church, was very wonderful. And as I'm sure you know, Dan, in the Catholic world, our priests are phenomenal, and what they are able to do is miraculous. There's so much crammed into seminary because their formation is so intense, and they don't always have practical orientation on things like running meetings and planning and setting goals with their teams. I mean, beyond common sense stuff. A lot of that's changed in the last maybe 20 years, which is fantastic, with all the wonderful consultancies and apostolates out there helping with this. But we, nonetheless, I started out doing this, I think it was 11 years ago, and in our diocese, and there was a real appetite among some of the priests, and it met a need. And I discovered an aptitude for it. It just came naturally, and it was such a joy. And I found I was able to be far more effective in being helpful in serving the church's mission and good leaders through that than I had in my prior work. So I'll make another long story short, but basically in this course of a weekend, which was October, Canadian Thanksgiving, which is the second Monday in October in Canada, for those who don't know, the Lord directed me to leave my job. This was 2015, okay, and then do consulting full time. I discovered about a month later. So that's the sort of story with the book and the model, and a bit about me and my work.
No way, man. This is so good. I really appreciate. There's a lot that we're going to dig into. Let's unpack it.
Let's do it.
First of all, you started in diocesan parish work, and you were put into a position, and now knowing your working genius, it makes a lot of sense. By the way, what are your 2 working geniuses, your top 2?
Yes, thank you. Wonder and galvanizing. And they call the moniker for that pairing is the philosophical motivator, which is pretty apt for me, I think.
Yeah. So working, wonder, and galvanizing.
Wonder and galvanizing. That's right.
And then comparing that also with your YOS of seeking clarity, making sense of things and keeping things simple, putting you I'm thinking as a leader, putting you in a place and saying, there's no structure. You make your own. You were probably like, no, this is horrible, right?
And I didn't know. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead. No, put someone like me in that role, I'd jump right in and be like, I've got tons of ideas. Let's create a bunch of stuff. They'd have to tell me to slow down. Different when we put someone like you, because your talents are in clarity. So you needed them to say, hey, this is what we want. But yeah, I interrupted you. So let's get to your answer.
Yes. I think you kind of went where I was trying to go, but you're absolutely right. And not, I think just not knowing that, and then you don't know what to do with that. And so I went somewhere false, which was there's something inadequate with me, or I need to just work harder, or I went to futile solutions. And whereas the better solution would have been to partner deliberately with people with whom we had complementary gifts. And there was a lot of that organically. For example, I had an advisory board, as it was called, and they would suggest things, and it was fantastic because they were wise and great, and they did suggest things that I implemented. But when there were several suggestions and I had to be the one to navigate through them all, I could get paralyzed, and I could get the paralysis led to other things like more stress and
Right.
a dark view of myself, because I thought, man, I can't make decisions. Like I'm not even a man, you know? And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
not great.
and you mentioned the dark period, right? Because the father of lies loves it when we're vulnerable.
Right.
And he got in your head and told you some lies. You get some of that imposter syndrome, like, why am I
Yeah.
here? Who thought I could do this job?
Right.
Well, you could do that job. If you knew back then what you know now, you would have handled it completely different.
Mhm.
The other thing you talked about is the importance of self-awareness. You know, I'm a big fan of Chris Lowney. I had him on the podcast. He wrote Heroic Leadership. This was the first leadership book that I ever read, but it's based on he was a Jesuit seminarian before he became a tremendous success on Wall Street, and he left discerned out.
Yep.
But one of the things that the first step, the 4 pillars of Jesuit leadership, the first step is self-awareness.
Okay.
Understanding ourselves, what drives us, and what gifts we have.
Right.
And so you went through, I think, a growth period. I think let's call it what it is. It's a growth period.
Yes.
Led by lack of self-awareness. Thankfully, you ran into a couple of people, Keith, who helped you discover, okay, hey, Kyle, this is where you're at your best. So for those that don't know Working Genius, describe your top 2 working geniuses, Wonder and
Galvanizing.
One was Galvanizing, because I have Galvanizing. I'm Galvanizing and Enablement.
Okay.
And that goes with my Contribute. But let's talk about yours.
Yeah, cool. And at some point, if you want, just so I don't forget, I might mention my colleague, Stephanie. I've had a few people I've got to have the privilege of working with, and one in particular currently, Stephanie, who's invention and discernment, which in the flow of the model are in between my 2. And it's a wonderful pairing of gifts. So to your question, Wonder, well, maybe just backing up, the model, if people don't know, is it describes the function, the 6 steps of all work, essentially. You have to have questions, then you have solutions, then you have to evaluate what's going to work, and then you have to get people on board, and then do the thing and finish the thing. It's kind of the model.
Right.
It's Wonder, Invention, Discernment, Galvanizing, Enablement, Tenacity. And the idea is to work within the areas that you're particularly gifted, as they're called geniuses, that we can presume God gave us gifts in. So Wonder and Galvanizing. Wonder is analogously the 30,000 foot step or function. It's where you wonder about things, you ponder possibilities, you ask questions, you think about how things could be different or better. I think of it kind of like the curious sort of / philosophical, maybe / critical, and hopefully a constructive way function, and the dreaming function in a good way if it's deployed wisely. And then Galvanizing is a little bit farther down the model, about halfway. It's rallying people around the direction, the decision, casting a vision for things. It tends to correlate well with people that like sales and building relationships, which is definitely true with me. So the pairing is, for me, it's, as I said, the philosophical motivator. I like to actually do sales. I enjoy, if I believe in the thing, because for me, it's like hunting and the thrill of the hunt. And I know that my hunting is actually for other people and to provide for my family. But it's therefore exciting, and it's hard and it's challenging. So it's like a hunt, right? It's not easy to find and track and effectively kill an animal that you need to eat or want to eat. And then Wonder, as I think I've described. So that's the pairing. Maybe just for contrast, for fun, Dan, I worked with someone once who was a Wonder, the top 30,000 feet, and then also Tenacity, which is like 3 feet above the ground.
Yeah.
And that's a rare statistically. So is actually Wonder Galvanizing is relatively rare. For what that's worth. Wonder Tenacity is particularly rare because you just think of the contrast in the one person. And I had someone once say that, oh, this explains to me, when we discovered this about her, this explains why my thoughts sometimes crash.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, when you look at me, Galvanizing and Enablement, they're right next to each other, right? You bring people together and then you help them get things done, right? And that's goes right along with my why of Contribute. I just want to help people. I'm just here. How can I help you get that done? You mentioned in Wonder is asking questions. And so I'm always trying to match it up to your why of Clarify. So you ask those important questions. I always like to say about Clarify, people are probably, I could say that about people with Wonder as their working geniuses. You ask the questions we might forget to ask. One of the things that I've been accused of is of ready, fire, aim.
Same here.
Yeah. So you tend to move faster. What's great about Kyle is he's going to ask questions along the way. And so you're going to get clarity as you go. So you might be ready to move, but you're going to say, well, wait, what about this? Have we thought about this? What I find with people like Kyle when I work with them is they'll slow me down enough with their questions that I'll say, oh, you know what? I hadn't even thought of that. And that's really important. So asking those questions is probably such an important part of the work that you do as you help people gain clarity. And as coaches, I know, and when we're working with organizations, the best way to get to solutions is by asking questions rather than telling. Everybody thinks consultants come in and tell you what to do. It's more about finding the answer within the group. How do you tell us a little bit about your practice, Kyle? Because I mentioned a little bit in the introduction how we both tend to do similar things. We're both trying to help teams work at their highest level.
Yes.
But tell us about your process a little bit so that people that are listening can understand what goes on at Teamwork.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. It's as I mentioned, it's largely modeled after the models of Patrick Lencioni. And the premise of it is the organizational health, which I'll unpack in a second, it's like the soil in the garden if the organization analogously is a garden. And it can be any organization, for profit, nonprofit, small, big. It's the healthy dimension is the soil. And then in contrast with the smart dimension, which are all important and good, smart dimension involves things like strategy and marketing or communications, or including communications, technology, finance, operations, programming, if you have a programming function. Those smart and kind of more classically measurable functions, more classically business functions you can get training in at school, et cetera. Those are like the plants, whereas the soil are the health dimension, involving things like minimal politics among teams and people, minimal confusion, as we've discussed, high morale and productivity, retention of good fit people, and in a faith-based context, a real reliance on God. So we're not just working on human effort alone. So that's what we focus on, is that latter part, the healthy dimension, because per the garden analogy, I'm looking outside at some trees and some plants as it's springtime here. If the soil quality is anemic, or if it's too dry, or you're in a desert, I think, climate, right? New Mexico, or quasi-desert, if it doesn't have enough moisture or the wrong chemical balance, no plant can flourish, right?
We're in a what we call a high desert. Yes.
High desert, yes. So it's dry. You need the right conditions in the soil. So we work on the soil. In terms of the process, we accompany and equip and coach. Those are probably the key verbs: accompany, equip, coach. And it's not really a teaching function. It's kind of minimally that. It's more helping them, as you described, discover and commit to and implement some clarity and some better teamwork. So we usually do a couple of day offsite sessions initially after some earlier preparation and diagnostic work with the team to get to know them and their situation. Do a couple of days, 2 or 3 days initially as kind of a foundational consultation to help them assess and get better in teamwork very concretely, and then also get clearer very quickly. So we don't really like long, extensive, highly consultative processes for planning. We like a more kind of quick and dirty that then can be refined and ratified, tested and improved, and introduced to a broader group of people. And then we accompany clients and teams for usually 3 to 6 months minimum, and sometimes work with next level teams to help them apply and do similarly. Yeah. And then some of our clients we work with for years, they kind of treat me like a bit of a dentist. Every 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months, we'll do a day or two together, or a day with one of each team. And they don't necessarily have to, but they just find it keeps them accountable to checking in on their health and their cohesion and clarity. And so with some, we have that kind of relationship too.
Great. Well, I want to dig a little bit more into your working genius, because this is so fascinating to me. I literally spend, I've done every assessment out there, and I love learning more. I love how they correlate with each other, right? So working genius, as I was looking at Wonder, when we look at the description of it, they're the people who ask the why. Or what if? Well, when you look at people with the why of clarify, we literally say these are the people that ask questions, that will dig in and get more clarity, because clarity keeps coming up in our conversation. Tell me a little bit about, Kyle, if somebody is not familiar with Working Genius, are there certain working geniuses? Because you talked about it with working with someone who's complementary, and we do the
Yes.
same thing with the Wise. I do the same thing with Colby. There are different assessments that I use. Are there certain people that are going to get along really well, and there are certain people who are, I don't like to say opposite, they're complementary. They have strengths that are different, but they help each other get things done. Can you give us a little bit of an overview, or maybe even, do you have an example where you ran into a group that's actually more fun, a couple of people who were maybe thought oh my gosh, we're so different, we can't get along, and you helped them see that, no, you're actually complementary, and this is how you guys can help each other?
It obviously, like these assessments, as you know, it doesn't answer or explain everything. It's one facet of the diamond that is the human person, right? You have to factor in other facets, and including character or lack thereof. And so I'll include that as I answer your question. Are there, yes, the different genius profiles theoretically are all complementary. It actually would be, if you had to choose, say you had two applicants that you thought were both fantastic for position X, and one was the exact same as you or similar to you, and one was very different, go with the very different, because you're going to be able to be a better, more robust team. Because as I described, if on a team of say 5 people, if you have a hole in any of those 6 functions where no one, for who that comes naturally for no one, then that's not ideal.
Right.
So in the function of work, it's best to be complementary. Now, that doesn't account for people who are not humble or who are not friendly, which it doesn't matter what the profile is, that's going to cause issues. But it might in particular cause issues when you have the differences, because you won't necessarily appreciate and be receptive to the other person's contribution that's different than yours. You might be threatened by it because of a lack of humility, for example. You might think, that person wants to make all the decisions, when they're just actually trying to help refine the possible decisions through probably the genius of discernment. Or you might think of someone with galvanizing as overbearing sometimes, or kind of pushy. And I'll tell an example. I worked with a team where they had an incredible galvanizer who did amazing things when he was excited about projects and offerings. But what he wasn't strong in was evaluating what the best course of action was. So it was basically, if he liked the thing, which might have just come out of a very casual discussion over a drink or something, he would be like, let's do it, let's sell it, let's make this happen. And both people might find it overwhelming, but also it could cause confusion sometimes, because the team actually hadn't settled on something. He just went for it thinking this is great, and wasn't someone that really needed to care about the details of implementation, because of his both position, because that's another factor, is position, right? If it's a CEO or an executive director, or are you someone lower down the pecking chain, you have different considerations. So all those things have to be thoughtfully thought about in applying this. I mean, in my marriage, my wife is enablement and tenacity, and so is my executive assistant, Christine. So that's the lower altitudes function. That's a fantastic, theoretically fantastic pairing with a guy like me, because they will thoughtfully, assiduously, carefully help and then finish the stuff. And they kind of, I think the expression is like, kind of think around corners, even like anticipate. Maybe it's more like they just know what stuff is going to demand, and they know things like how long decision A might take to implement. So maybe let's not do that for 6 months because of what we have going on now. Whereas I'm not naturally good at thinking like that. I'm more like that other guy I described, where if I'm bought in and excited, like, let's just do it and we'll figure things out as we go. But sometimes that's not the wisest. So I think to answer your question, the core really is humility plus your working genius, and then an open receptivity to other people and their contributions, which takes actually confidence. I mean, true humility is a true confidence, right? You're not insecure because your identity is rooted in God ultimately. Or if you're not a Christian, you're you might just have a healthy sense of self. Let's put it that way, where you're not the center of the universe, and yet you have value too. So you're neither doubting and insecure, but also not arrogant.
I love that you brought in character. I think that's important. if you have integrity, if you have humility, those are all characteristics of a personality, because you can be wonder and enabler, but what's your character? What's your humility? What's your friendliness? You talked about that. That's important, right? How people interpret things. And that's the filters that organizations go through. So, as I was reading your bio, and we talk about who you help, and I think what's really cool is what you're talking about is helping leaders multiply their organization's intelligence and eliminate cultural dysfunction, which happens from, like you said, you might have two people that are very similar, and you have a choice whether you promote one or the other. Well, there are other factors that come in. Now, you mentioned doing this, the awareness portion fairly quickly, but your engagements are 3 to 6 months. And like you said, you're like a dentist. Maybe you come in every 3 to 6 months and do a checkup.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest challenge you see with when leaders bring you in? What are they usually? Because I see a pattern, but I'm not going to tell you the pattern I see. I'd love to hear from you. What pattern? What are leaders mostly looking for when they engage teamwork?
Yeah, great question, Dan. I think I would put it in two categories broadly, and then I'll get a little more concrete. One would be there's a kind of a crisis. I mean, it's very uncommon that someone says, "Can you come tomorrow?" Because it's not like a factory's on fire. I don't do that.
Right.
But a team can be on fire, and it might be, "Can you come in 2 weeks? Because we're really struggling." My colleague talks about, she hired me actually 8 or 9 years ago. That's how we know each other. And then I recruited her last year, I think, or a year and a half ago, after she was leaving her organization. And her team was on fire. They had some raging, let's just call it sort of trust questions, and we don't know if we can continue together, a real impasse. So one category would be a crisis, less extreme usually than that. It's we're really stuck. So maybe crisis is too strong, but we're stuck. Our meetings aren't going very well.
Right.
We are spinning our wheels. And then there's the category of we want to optimize. We don't know what we don't know. We're kind of 8.5 out of 10, but we'd love to know what 9 looks like. And what that might look like is, I just think our edge is a little soft, or our meetings are kind of flat, or we're not really unified. That's a common thing. Our
Right.
people or departments are kind of siloed, kind of doing their own thing. And then some of the cracks, some of the downsides of that are starting to appear, like a lack of communication, a lack of collaboration. Sometimes
Right.
people start to kind of hoard their areas and not want to help other people. And then what that results in, it's sort of like, it's people moving in different directions, and sometimes at cross purposes. And then that can actually undermine relationships, even unintentionally. And those would be some of the common pain points and situations that lead people to connect with us.
That makes a lot of sense, Kyle. And, I have had one client hire me when they were on fire, and you're going to laugh. This is a family-owned business, very successful, but I got a call from their HR, and it's one of the cousins, right? He's running the HR department. He's like, "Dan," because I had done some work with him and his wife, and he said, "Dan, we need you." And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Every time we have a leadership meeting, it ends with people yelling at each other. It always ends, because it's family, and they're Latino, and so there's that fiery Latino blood." And he says, "It always ends up in a screaming match, and
Wow.
I hate it. And can you help?" And so that's probably one where you probably would hesitate, right? And I remember thinking to myself, "Man, that sounds like a challenge. I'll take it," but I wasn't sure. What am I getting myself into? But then as we started talking and we started getting to know how senior leadership, and we get into, okay, this is how you naturally take action. This is what you're driven towards.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really happening here is there's some character stuff. There's some history stuff, and there's some lack of humility. And so let's get to that, but let's talk about it in a way that takes more than a 3 to 6 month engagement. So I'm currently in a 1 year long engagement with that group, but it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. I keep growing, right, as I look into it, because, I'm not going to tell. So the matriarch that was married to the the founder of the company who's no longer around, hey, you need to start doing this. And your attitude is, no, you're just not going to be able to do that. You have to find a way to say those things in a nice way so that they're received and they see the positive impacts. Biggest challenge for you, most challenging situation you've been put in, Kyle?
Probably the most challenging. There have been a few times where my legs have been shaking in a client session, and it's because I'm helping. I'm either quasi confronting / and helping a leader confront a person. And confront is a strong word. We really mean address directly a serious concern, usually about their behavior. Performance issues tend to be easier because they're less loaded and less subjective. But when it's behavioral, it's it's more subjective and it's harder to measure and it's more personal. And so it can be really unnerving, I guess, to go there. And also when you're confronting someone who is not humble about their lack of humility, you're confronting someone that by the definition of the issue doesn't want to receive that confrontation because it's a threat, right? Like it's a particularly personal, uncomfortable threat for them. But you have to do it. So there was a situation where a team member basically didn't want to follow the direction of a new valid team leader and wanted to do his own thing. And it got really tense and he got defensive. And I was basically in a meeting where we also discovered a lack of honesty, and it got kind of brought out like directly. It was really rather dramatic. So but the leg shaking for me is usually accompanied by peace too, because there's a kind of a thrill and a peace that comes with doing what's good, even though the stakes are high and it's uncomfortable, obviously. So it's back a little bit to that hunting thing, the thrill of doing what is good and right that's hard. And then a few situations like that where the conversation gets very tense, very real, and it really needs to happen. And there's this also, we don't know where this is going to go. This could affect someone's employment. It could affect this team. It could affect their careers. We have to be really mindful of, especially when you have someone that the trust level is low, you're not sure what they might do. Clients sometimes are thinking about, we have to be mindful of litigation potentially with how we navigate this, which is a real thing, especially in the US, right? The lawyers tend to be more abundant than in my country. And
I am friends with a few of them, and yeah, I know. Yeah, but it's good work they do, and they did represent those that maybe feel they were wronged, and sometimes they haven't been. And I think it's how you present it. There's something you said there, Kyle, that I really like. You accompany your clients in these conversations, and I sometimes do, sometimes don't. Most of the time, I'm coaching from afar, and I'm saying, okay, these are things maybe that we want to bring up, and I maybe even rehearse having that conversation.
Yep. Good.
But you're in the room with them, and which I think has got to be very good for them sometimes.
And not always, to be clear, not always. That's actually more uncommon. It sort of comes up through the team sessions we do, and then sometimes they say, hey, we need to have a more targeted conversation with this person. Then sometimes in there, sometimes not. Yeah.
I learned this in when I was managing teams in the medical device industry. One of my employees called it carefrontations. He's like, we're having this confrontation because I care. And so I'd love to hear from you. What's a great way, because these are tough conversations. What's a way you've learned to enter that conversation so that the person is open to what you're bringing? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
How do you open that conversation so that person doesn't feel threatened? Okay. Oh, great. I'm here with my boss and the consultant. I bet they're going to, chew me out about something. They may already have a negative attitude towards the meeting that's happening.
Yeah.
What's a great way, or what's something that you have found works really well to set that conversation in a good place so that it's productive?
I'm not sure there's anything you can do to alleviate all apprehension, obviously. What I do find, though, at least that I'm aware of, probably just by the nature of it, when you have an intimate meeting like that and you've got a consultant involved, or your boss calls you in and there's been tension. If your boss says, I want to meet with you after a team meeting where things didn't go well, you probably know that it's going to be a heavy conversation.
Yeah.
But let's fast forward into the conversation itself. I did some self-study in the crucial conversations method. Are you familiar with that, Dan?
Very familiar. Yes, I love it.
Yeah, me too. And for those who don't know, the method that it proposes is super helpful to help alleviate defensiveness. It can't eliminate it because people are people, but it can do a lot to help move the conversation forward helpfully. And to put it very simply, the method involves, I think, 3 or 4 steps. One is to state 2 or 3 relevant facts that have led you to your concern about the person. And you have to strip that description of those facts from all assumptions and judgments and emotional language. And I'll use an example after I go through the model if you want. The second thing is then you state your concern. You have to kind of drop that bomb because otherwise they might not know what you're concerned about.
Right. And
then thirdly, you invite them into giving their perspective on what you are concerned about so that it's meant to meant to lead to a discussion rather than just a one-way thing. And that is huge. What the authors talk about is that as you're attempting this is like a model, right? But you have a real person in relationship and dynamic, which doesn't always work with a model. You need to pay attention to the psychological, I forget what they use. They call it something like psychological safety or...
Yes, it's psychological safety.
Okay, thank you. And if that gets weaker, which usually you can tell from defensive behavior, right? Gestures, words, people not wanting to listen to you, then you have to back up and try to restore that. And the ways you can do that are just a clarification statement. Hey, I'm not trying to attack you. Or, hey, I don't think you're stupid. Or, hey, I don't think you're useless. I'm trying to help with this area that is causing some concern. So that they call it a contrasting statement. I'm not doing this. I am doing this. That can help restore the sense of relative comfort level to keep going. Yeah. So you have to be mindful of that and stop the model and back up, because if that minimum level of comfort isn't there, you can't do anything. So I found that model is super. It's helped me personally. I do it with friends where I have a concern. Yeah.
You can do it with family. I mean, that is
really anybody.
Great. These are things we can do with family. I remember one of my favorite questions, and I think it was in Crucial Conversations. It said, you ask the question ahead of time you have to earn the right to have that conversation. So one of the ways to see if you've earned that right is to say, hey, Kyle, do you believe that I have your best interest in mind? And start the conversation that way. And if Kyle says yes, then we're going to be okay because you believe I have your best interest. So I'm going to tell you some things that maybe are uncomfortable for me to say to you, but it's because I care. Versus if you say, no, Dan, I don't think you have my best interest in mind, then I've got some work to do before we can have that conversation, right? So there's some trust building that needs to happen. Before we, we're getting close to the top of the hour, I want to make sure we talk a little bit about the role faith has played in your business. You've not been shy about talking about it as we've talked throughout the interview, but tell us what role faith plays at Teamwork Consulting and what the work that you're doing and how you discern working with clients and basically your everyday work.
We decided a couple of years ago that we would focus on working with mission-driven organizations. So not necessarily faith-based, but they have to be, what we mean by that is they have to be serving the common good. And they are often faith-based or kind of faith-aligned, or businesses that have people that we sum it up as you have to care about people and principles, moral principles. And if you do, then we'd love to potentially help you, because we don't want to spend our time with people that aren't doing that particularly, shall I just say, kind of good work. That's why our little tagline is make good work great.
Do good work. Yeah. Make good work great. I love it.
Good work great. In terms of faith, we are all people of faith, and that's been deliberate so that we have a common philosophy, a common worldview, a common foundation in the Lord, a common moral framework too. And I think we draw from, we are prayerful people. So we're drawing from God to get his help in our assignments with people, because while this work is kind of on the natural organizational level, it involves human beings who have a soul and are engaged in a spiritual drama, right? A battle of sorts, even if it's just in the context of their work and meetings. And we care about them. We care about people a lot. So we're prayerful. We ask God for help and direction and seek to live a life modeled on Jesus Christ, because he's the ideal man. And we do enjoy it when clients have that shared worldview, because we can have that kind of shared common depth together too, which allows maybe deeper trust and probably candor. Yeah. But at the same time, it's an interesting situation to be working in a secular context where you're not hired to bring a faith perspective, and where it might be unwise to be overt about these kind of things, because it's not what you're doing. You're not preaching. You're not a pastor. But I remember, as an example of some influence I had in a very secular context, I was working with a manufacturing team years ago. And as we were just kind of talking about teamwork and personal profiles and backgrounds to warm up the team discussions, a few people mentioned how their marriages had fallen apart because of working so much. It was very, very sad. I think 2 or 3 people of a team of 8 were on a second marriage or had gone through a divorce, which is again sad, of course, and also talked about their work, essentially their workaholism, and those things were not unrelated. And right. Later on in the day, I remember being prompted, and I'm quite confident it was God prompting me to say carefully something to them, which was, I think I said, at the end of our life, no one is wishing that they spent more time checking email or spent more hours at the office. I'm pretty sure no one's thinking about that. But what they are thinking about, what we all will be thinking about, is, did I tend to those key relationships in my life? And you could tell there was a lot of silence after. People were really thinking on this. And I said it very lovingly and carefully. And I knew that they knew this, but I'm reminding them of something. And I thought of it later as it was an interesting sort of prophetic platform, if you will, that working in a secular context with this kind of model has allowed. So that's pretty cool. It's an honor.
That's really, I like the way you delivered that. I think it's important. Why Not Leadership, we believe, I read a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it's one of those things. We don't regret the things we did. We regret the things we didn't do. We regret the time we didn't spend with our kids. We regret the things we didn't get to because we were too busy doing instead of being. So that's a really great story. I really appreciate you sharing that. Kyle, how do people get a hold of you? I want to make sure we put that in the show notes. What's the best way to reach you if somebody's looking for the kind of help that you guys provide? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, thank you. We've got a website. It's teamwork.ca. It's team with 2 E's, because it's meant like teaming with life, from the Genesis creation account is where it comes from. Play on words, obviously. So teamwork2es.ca, because I'm in Canada. Right. And you can connect with us there. There's also, by the way, a free team kind of mini assessment exercise you can download and use if you want to get a taste of our work and not necessarily call me. Perfect. We also have a podcast too, Dan, called the Serious Playfulness Podcast. You can find it on the various platforms. So you can check us out there.
Take a look at it. We'll put links to all of that. We'll get that link. We'll make sure Sunil puts that in the show notes. Kyle, it's been a pleasure talking to you, learning from you. This was not disappointing at all. This was actually really exceeded expectations. I knew we were going to have a good conversation just based on the previous conversations we had. Guys, if you're getting something out of this interview, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this interview with your friends. The Lead Different podcast is looking to make a difference with leaders who are willing to lead different. And Kyle is one of those leaders who is helping other leaders lead different from a place of faith, from a place of self-awareness, and from a place where work is fun and it's teaming. I love that. TEEM work.ca is the website. Kyle, why don't we end the show on that note?
Why not?
That's fantastic. Kyle, you're not only a great coach, but you're also trainable. You did that just perfectly. Guys, we really appreciate you listening. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends. We're going to look forward to having this episode air. Kyle, thank you for joining us all the way from the western edge of Canada and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the Lead Different podcast.
My pleasure, Dan. It's been a joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.